Incremental readings. Let's continue the advantages of incremental reading. Now it's time for consolidation. So why continuous review matters? You know that in order to use Supermemo to get something from it, you need to use it quite frequently. Doesn't have to be a lot of time, but has to be quite frequent. So we must review what we learn in order to remember it. Reading an article in intervals naturally begins with memory consolidation. Learning without review is like writing in sand, soon washed away with time. Again, so pathetic. And that's basically the idea. You will read, but as you read, it's forgotten very quickly. So it's like if nothing had happened almost. Then, let's compare the traditional approach against the incremental approach. So usually you read an article, the entire thing from top to bottom every time. Next time if you have forgotten, or oh yeah, this detail, it's vague, I don't recall, you will then locate that article and reread the key parts. That's inefficient in the long term. What's the incremental approach? You begin the memory consolidation as you read, because you start extracting crucial points, the most value first. Hey, I'm telling Supermemo, I want this, I want that. Because I set a high priority, I'm telling Supermemo, hey, I do care a lot about this. I don't care about this much. I do especially care about this thing. And then this will show up. Depending on how important it is to me, it will show up sooner or later. And then I will decide, hey, I want to remember this by making a consolidation. That's all I do. That's the incremental approach. And the difference against traditional reading is that the memory consolidation starts as I read. Consolidation in the moment reduces repetition down the road. Exactly. You may think that incremental reading is slower, more taxing at the beginning, which could be true, but only at the very beginning. In the long term, it's the opposite. Incremental reading wins because you don't waste your time reading. Then, what's the process of incremental reading? Very high overview. You read an article in segments, so you chunk it down. You extract the most valuable knowledge in small chunks, even smaller chunks. And then you consolidate memory during intervals, because since I do interrupt the reading, during this reading I will sleep at night, right? And during sleep I have memory consolidation. As easy as that. Then, small steps, big impact. Incremental reading ensures each moment counts. Or, as I will say, small victories, but permanent victories. What are the benefits of this pre-consolidation? Fewer repetitions needed later. So overall, in the long term, in your life, you'll have achieved the same thing with less effort, less repetitions, less time. Not just that, even more quality. Strong context ties the information together. Yeah. And redundancy improves retention. Exactly. You may have seen the same thing in a slightly different wording or in a different perspective, but semantically it's the same idea, the same concept, so this reinforces memory. Then, when context and clarity merge, retention flourishes effortlessly. Why? Because if you have context and it's very clear, it will be easier to remember those facts. Therefore, memory retention will increase, and even that with a less effort. I do less effort to memorize, to remember, and I remember more. Why? Because at the end of the day, the bottleneck in incremental reading is the formulation of knowledge. When you are very advanced, that you know how to do it, all of that, how you express yourself to have the key, to remember the key information, what you want to actually recall, that will be the bottleneck. It's the hardest skill to master if you ever master formation of knowledge. Then, closolations and Q&As. By the time you create closolations or question and answer items, you already consolidated memory. This is a big difference against Anki or other apps that they only have flashcards. you don't do the learning on that app. So you do copy pasting and adapt to create the flashcards, or you import flashcards from someone else, share decks, stuff like that. In Supermemo, when you create the flashcard, which would be like this, now I created the flashcard, I already did this. This counts as the first repetition. I have already done the first repetition. It already has an interval. Unlike many apps like Anki, that no, you just created the flashcard, that is a new flashcard with no interval. It's new. That doesn't exist in Supermemo or in incremental reading. What? Because you create your own items, by the way. So when you create the item, is even if it's a consolidation or a QA, you already consolidated memory. Each piece is rooted in understanding and context. That's why at the end of the day, you can afford longer first intervals in incremental reading. Then, a well-framed question can kindle both memory and meaning. That A, it's very good, very well formulated, that A, it's easy to understand, but at the same time, it will be easy to memorize, to remember. Then, gelling out knowledge. Incremental extraction slows down the learning process on purpose. That's why if I read a paper or I read a book incrementally, on the first go, I will go slower than if I read the same book linearly, obviously. But this turns out that is a pro. It will be a con if you are in the school system and you have that many weeks to read that book, and you have a deadline, an exam, or assignment. But this is an artificial requirement. In your life, a human learning doesn't have this restriction, and therefore, no big deal. So at the end of the day, you will read the same book, but you will have acquired what you wanted to remember, and you would recall almost everything. That's a big difference. There will be no need to reread that book, unless you have skipped some sections that you didn't care, and for whatever reason in the future, oh, now I do care about this, that I skip, let me see it. But other than that, what you have read, what you have processed, no need to reread it, ever in your life. Then, meaning and applicability deepen with each review. Exactly. So it's very crude or very green, let's say, and you reinforce this memory. And especially if you do things right, that, hey, you have some redundancy, you came across the same facts from a different perspective, different sources, and so on, and you are building these mental models, the big picture, incrementally, you will be deepen the meaning. And applicability. If you study nonsense, like I did many years ago, like 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, and there was no applicability. Not bro. I have been reviewing this in my space repetition app, was not Supermemo, and I didn't apply that. I didn't apply that yet in 10 years. It only exists in my software. In real life, it's inapplicable. So it's not just the meaning that deepens; it's the applicability, both at the same time. It's a killer. So as knowledge gels, insights arise, shaping information into wisdom or knowledge. Because at the end of the day, you want to translate the information that is out there to knowledge, not just rote memorize information and that's it. That's the key difference. Most people think that, oh yeah, incremental thing, oh yeah, it's just to memorize. If it's just rote memorization. Not the case. Then, multiple perspectives. Repetition in different contexts has associated power. So remember that redundancy doesn't contradict the minimum information principle. It's actually one of the rules in the 20 rules of formulation. See the same fact from varied angles reinforcing understanding. So it turns out it's actually a good thing. So you should, I have a flashback about that. Oh yeah, let me skip it. Not necessarily, because perhaps now I'm using jargon that I didn't use before. So it's the same fact, but more formal. I'm building the associative power of this jargon to more common language. As an example, diverse contexts form new pathways to the same understanding. You know the expression that all roads lead to Rome goes in that direction. Oh wow, no pun intended. So you can have multiple contexts that at the end of the day, they lead to the same understanding. It's the same fact in a very high level perspective. So to wrap up the video, the conclusions. Incremental reading merges extraction and consolidation, saving time and deepening comprehension. So you achieve both higher quality and less duration. So you go faster and do things in a more quality in the long term. It's a win-win. And a mindful approach to review fosters stronger, more versatile memory. So, even more perks to do the same thing but just incrementally. With incremental reading, learning evolves from a single event into a journey of lasting discovery. Absolutely. It's not one-time event and that's it, or accumulation of one-time events, but it becomes a journey of lasting discovery. Again, poetic to wrap up what we have said. So that's everything about the advantages of consolidation for incremental reading. See you incrementally.